Your layoff wasn't a setback. It was the system letting you go so you could finally build your own. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Soft Girl Era podcast. I'm your host, LeAnne Dolce, pronounced Dolice, like sweet softness whispered in French. I'm your guide from burnout to boundaries, from doing to being, from strong to soft, and loving every second of it. Today, I want to share something with you that stopped me in my tracks, something that shifted the way I see resilience, entrepreneurship, and what it really means to rise after the fall. I had the incredible opportunity to sit down with Nichola Thompkins, a visionary who's been on the front lines of economic justice and entrepreneurship for Black women. Nichola isn't just a researcher or an advocate. She's a truth teller, a bridge builder, and someone who's dedicated her life to making sure Black women don't just survive, but thrive. Her work has illuminated the hidden stories behind the numbers, the resilience behind the statistics, and the power behind the pivot. She's been a fierce champion for those who've been pushed out of systems they helped build, and she's showing the world that when institutions fail us, we don't collapse, we create. And what she shared with me, what the data reveals, is something we all need to hear. Because here's what we think we know. We think the biggest challenge for Black women entrepreneurs is breaking into the private sector. We think it's about access to capital, about networks, about breaking glass ceilings in boardrooms and startups. And yes, those things matter. But what if I told you that in 2025, the real crisis, the one that pushed more Black women into entrepreneurship than ever before, wasn't in the private sector at all? What if I told you it was in the public sector, in the very places we thought were stable, secure, safe? Let me say that again. In 2025, Black women lost over 155,000 public sector jobs, 155,000, the sharpest decline in 25 years. Federal jobs alone, 95,371 positions gone. Manufacturing, 51,545 jobs vanished. And this wasn't just about layoffs. This was about a seismic shift that forced Black women, many of whom had spent decades building careers in education, health, government, to reinvent themselves, not out of ambition, but out of necessity. Nichola Thompkins helped me see this clearly. She said, and I'm paraphrasing here, that what we're witnessing is not just an employment crisis, it's a forced exodus, a reckoning. And in that reckoning, Black women are doing what they've always done. They're adapting, they're pivoting, they're building something new from the rubble of what was taken from them. So today I want to talk about this. I want to talk about how the narrative of Black women entrepreneurship is being flipped, not from choice to necessity, but from survival to sovereignty. I want to talk about how public sector vulnerability is driving a new wave of entrepreneurship, how demographic momentum in founder programs is proving resilience in the face of employment drops, and how sector shifts, painful as they are creating unexpected opportunities for entrepreneurial ventures. Let's start with the numbers because the numbers don't lie. According to research from the Economic Policy Institute, Black women's employment rate fell 1.4 percentage points to 55.7% in 2025. That might not sound like much, but when you break it down, when you look at where those losses happened, the picture becomes devastating. Public sector losses totaled 155,656 jobs. Federal positions dropped by 95,371. Manufacturing shed 51,545 roles. And these weren't just jobs, these were careers, these were pensions, these were the stable foundations that Black women had built their lives on. But here's where the story shifts. Here's where Nichola Thompkins' insights become transformative. Because while Black women were losing ground in the public sector, they were gaining ground elsewhere. Private sector jobs increased by 76,419. Construction saw gains of 19,867 positions. Education and health services added 222,448 jobs. And in the midst of all this upheaval, something remarkable happened. Black women started launching businesses, not because they wanted to be entrepreneurs, not because they had some grand vision of disrupting an industry, but because they had to, because the systems they had trusted, the institutions they had served, had let them go. And this is where the University of Toronto's Black Founders Network comes in. In 2025, this program graduated 24 founders. 14 of them, 58%, were Black women. Think about that for a moment. 14 Black women who had navigated the post 2025 employment shifts, who had faced sharp public sector job losses, who had seen their employment rate drop, and who decided to enroll in a structured founder program for mentorship, funding access, and peer networks. All 14 completed the program. All 14 gained the startup tools to launch ventures, and many of them entered after 20, 25 layoffs in education, health, or government, leveraging their prior professional experience to build something new. These women didn't come into entrepreneurship with a safety net. They came in with a severance check, if they were lucky. They came in with skills honed in public service, in classrooms, in hospitals, in government offices, and they turned those skills into businesses. They turned their pain into power. They turned their layoffs into launch pads. Let me tell you about one woman in particular. She had spent 15 years in federal service. She had a master's degree. She had led teams. She had shaped policy. She had poured her brilliance into a system that promised stability. And then in 2025, she got the call. Budget cuts, restructuring, her position was eliminated. She was 47 years old. She had a mortgage, she had kids in college, and she had a choice. She could scramble for another government job, compete with hundreds of other displaced workers, or she could take everything she knew about systems, about leadership, about problem solving, and build something of her own. She chose the latter. She enrolled in the Black Founders Network. She learned how to pitch. She learned how to build a business plan. She learned how to access funding. And within a year, she had launched a consulting firm that helps nonprofits navigate federal grant applications. She's now employing three other women who were also laid off in 2025. She's not just surviving, she's thriving, and she's creating opportunities for others to thrive too. This is what Nichola Thompkins means when she talks about turning public sector pain into entrepreneurial power. This is what it looks like when Black women refuse to let a crisis define them. This is what it looks like when we stop waiting for institutions to save us and start building our own. But let's be clear. This isn't a feel good story about bootstrapping. This isn't about pulling yourself up by your bootstraps when the system kicks you down. This is about recognizing that the system was never designed to hold us. It was designed to use us to extract our labor, our brilliance, our loyalty, and then discard us when it was convenient. And what Black women are doing now, what Nichola Thompkins is documenting, is a refusal to accept that narrative. It's a reclamation of agency. It's a redefinition of what strength looks like. Because here's the thing, we've been taught that strength means endurance. That strength means showing up no matter what. That strength means carrying the weight of the world on our shoulders and never complaining. But what if strength also means knowing when to let go? What if strength means recognizing when a system is no longer serving you and having the courage to walk away? What if strength means taking the skills you've built, the knowledge you've accumulated, the networks you've cultivated, and using them to build something that's yours? This is the soft girl era. This is what it looks like to drop the cape. This is what it looks like to say, I'm not going to keep pouring into institutions that don't pour back into me. I'm going to pour into myself. I'm going to pour into my community. I'm going to build something that reflects my values, my vision, my worth. And the data backs this up. Across the United States, Black women who were laid off from stable public roles in 2025 drew on their skills from education and health, where 222,000 jobs were added to bootstrap new ventures. They pivoted to entrepreneurial roles in growing areas like construction, where nearly 20,000 jobs were created, and they launched self started firms. They converted job losses into 76,000 private sector opportunities, seeding startups, reshaping labor trends, and improving their adaptability in what some are calling a backlash era. Nichola Thompkins calls this demographic momentum. She says that when you look at programs like the Black Founders Network, where 58% of the 2025 cohort were Black women, you're not just seeing resilience, you're seeing a movement. You're seeing a generation of women who are refusing to be defined by what was taken from them and are instead defining themselves by what they're building. Let me share another story. There was a woman who worked in manufacturing for over 2 decades. She was a line supervisor. She trained new hires. She optimized processes. She was the glue that held her team together, and then her plant closed. 51,000 manufacturing jobs vanished for Black women in 2025, and hers was one of them. She was 52 years old. She didn't have a college degree, she didn't have a LinkedIn profile, but she had something more valuable. She had experience, she had expertise, she had a network of women who trusted her. So she started a business. She began offering training and consulting services to small manufacturers who needed to improve their operations. She leveraged her decades of hands on knowledge. She built a client base from the relationships she'd cultivated over the years. And within 18 months, she was making more than she ever did in her manufacturing job. She wasn't just surviving, she was thriving, and she was doing it on her own terms. This is what happens when we stop seeing layoffs as failures and start seeing them as forced freedoms. This is what happens when we stop mourning what was lost and start building what's possible. And here's the truth that Nichola Thompkins keeps reminding us of: the public sector didn't just let Black women go, it pushed them out. It systematically dismantled the very positions that Black women had fought to access, positions that represented progress, positions that represented stability, positions that represented a foothold in the middle class. And when those positions disappeared, it wasn't an accident, it was a choice made by policymakers, by budget cuts, by restructuring that prioritized everything except the people who had been holding those systems together. But here's what they didn't count on: they didn't count on the fact that Black women are builders. They didn't count on the fact that when you push us out, we don't just fall. We fly, we create, we innovate, we build empires from the ashes of what you tried to destroy. And that's exactly what's happening right now. In Toronto, 14 Black women walked across the stage of the Black Founders Network, not as victims of a broken system, but as architects of a new one. They didn't just complete a program, they launched businesses, they created jobs, they became the stability they were denied. Across the United States, tens of thousands of Black women are doing the same thing. They're taking the skills they honed in government offices, in schools, in hospitals, and they're building consulting firms, coaching practices, tech startups, wellness businesses, creative agencies. They're not waiting for permission, they're not waiting for validation. They're building. And this is where the call to action comes in. Because if you're listening to this and you're thinking, that's inspiring, but that's not me, I want you to stop right there. I want you to ask yourself, what if your next layoff is the launch pad for your legacy business? What if the skills you've been using to build someone else's empire are exactly what you need to build your own? What if the crisis you're facing right now is actually the catalyst for your transformation? Nichola Thompkins shared something with me that I can't stop thinking about. She said, we have to stop seeing entrepreneurship as a backup plan. We have to start seeing it as a reclamation plan, a way to take back our time, our energy, our power, a way to build wealth, not just for ourselves, but for our families, our communities, our future. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to audit your skills today. I want you to write down everything you know how to do, everything you've learned in your career, in your life, in your community. And then I want you to ask yourself, how can I use this to serve others? How can I use this to solve a problem? How can I use this to build something that's mine? And then I want you to join or start a founders network. Find your people. Find the women who are on this journey with you. Find the mentors, the peers, the supporters who will help you turn your vision into reality, because you don't have to do this alone. In fact, you can't do it alone. The women in the Black Founders Network didn't succeed because they were superhuman. They succeeded because they had support, they had structure, they had community. And that's what the soft girl era is all about. It's about recognizing that we don't have to carry everything by ourselves. It's about building networks of care, of support, of mutual uplift. It's about saying, I'm going to rest when I need to rest. I'm going to ask for help when I need help. I'm going to set boundaries that protect my peace. And I'm going to build something beautiful, something sustainable, something that honors who I am and who I'm becoming. Like Nichola Thompkins is doing this work because she believes in us. She believes in our capacity to transform pain into purpose. She believes in our ability to rise from the ashes of systems that failed us and build something better. And I believe it too. The public sector losses of 2025 were real. The pain was real, the fear was real, but so is the power, so is the resilience, so is the brilliance of Black women who refuse to be broken, who refuse to be silenced, who refuse to be stopped. So I'm asking you today, what are you going to do with this moment? Are you going to let this layoff define you, or are you going to let it refine you? Are you going to keep waiting for a system that's already shown you it doesn't value you? Or are you going to build your own? Are you going to keep playing small in spaces that were never designed for your greatness? Or are you going to step into your power and create something that reflects your vision, your values, your voice? Because the truth is, your layoff wasn't a setback, it was the system letting you go so you could finally build your own. Your skills aren't just resume bullets, they're the foundation of your empire. Your pain isn't just something to survive, it's something to transform. And your next chapter isn't about finding another job, it's about creating your legacy. Audit your skills today. Join or start a founders network. Turn your public sector pain into entrepreneurial power and step into your soft girl era, where you're not just surviving, you're thriving, where you're not just strong, you're soft, where you're not just building a business, you're building a life that honors every part of who you are. The world is waiting for what only you can build. Don't make it wait any longer.